passion for spreading empathy through literature. One of my two favorite topics, both my favorite topics, I have to say. So warm welcome to Dr. Myra Baksal. How are you?
Thank you for having me here. I'm good.
Oh, we are so pleased to have you. Tell us a little bit about, your passion for using books to spread empathy. I read a quote by Barack Obama who said there is an empathy deficit in this world. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. I think that picture books in particular have that potential to promote compassion and empathy to individuals. Multicultural children's picture books even more so, because multicultural children's books by itself serve as a mirror that would allow you to reflect the things that are happening to you, and at the same time it could also serve as a window to other worlds that are quite unfamiliar to you. So it is powerful in that sense.
So why the focus on picture books?
Picture books because I do have a fascination for the beautiful artwork in picture books, and I do believe that, I think it was Květa Pekovská, one of the famous children's book artists, who noted that picture books would be the first museum that a child visits.
That's a beautiful quote.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. And unless a child sees herself represented in that museum, to some extent she's going to wonder what her place in the world is.
Correct. She would feel invisible.
She or he.
Yes, that's right.
So this topic was something that you thought about specifically for the AFCC, multiculturalism through picture books, or promoting empathy through picture books?
I would go as far as claim that the entire Asian Festival of Children's Content is about promoting this kind of awareness, because I think you might be familiar with the momentum that is ongoing in the social media right now, the hashtag We Need Diverse Books. So this is exactly where AFCC comes in, and Singapore is at the very center of it in a sense, because the idea is for us to become kind of like the Bologna of Southeast Asia, where people or content creators can come from all over so that they can also experience what it's like to see the world through children's eyes coming from this part of the world, which was previously unheard of or unseen.
Can you share some examples of books that do promote empathy or compassion, in your opinion?
I kind of anticipated that question of yours, and I wanted to highlight local authors.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, there is one. This one is by Shakina Lin. She's a local author. She has written about the Asian Spice series, and I did a blurb for her picture book because the entire series is about promoting Asian values. And then there's also the Virtues series. Currently, it's being written by Ken Spillman. So it's meant to be a 12-book series that looks into promoting values such as resilience, a sense of responsibility, in a manner that is not didactic, but rather presents the situations in a very authentic format so that kids would be able to identify themselves in it. And it's all set in Singapore.
Oh, there's some great reads for parents out there wondering what to pick for bedtime reads for their kids. Specifically in the area of empathy, why is that such an important life lesson, Dr. Baksal?
Well, for the very simple reason that it makes us human. This is exactly what makes us human beings. So I think it's also important that combating prejudices about people whom we feel to be different from ourselves, it's something that needs to be addressed quite early in life. And that's where introducing rich literature comes in, because it serves to encourage dialogue and reflection as a means to challenge all of these preconceived notions that people might have. So reading books allow that space for a young reader to experience compassion and empathy. This enriches a person's life as it provides you with a lens through which you're able to view another person's world. It also gives you that rare opportunity, it's a gift almost, to be able to step outside of your own skin.
It is. I always say reading makes you immortal because it gives you multiple lives, right?
I like that.
Yeah, that you only have if you're a reader.
Yes.
When you came to Singapore, it was 2001. Share with us
2008.
2008, excuse me.
That's right.
Your daughter was born in 2001.
Correct.
And she was part of the reason reason why you came to Singapore, because you thought that, it would be a good environment to raise a child. I'm wondering, when you did come, did you check out the children's literature here, and what did you think about the #diversity quotient, so to speak, back then?
Well, I didn't know about the local authors at the time, but I had a deep, abiding passion for children's literature. You know what I really liked about Singapore? Yeah. It's the libraries.
I love our libraries. They're one of the best in the world. I bring visitors to our libraries.
Yes. I love how well-stocked the libraries
really are.
Yes.
They really are.
So it's amazing, because coming from, a developing country, we don't have libraries in the Philippines.
Share with our listeners where you're from. Yeah.
I'm coming from the Philippines, so we don't have libraries to speak of in the Philippines. So having that and borrowing books every week, we do that every week.
I'm sure she's a super user. 7 books.
Religiously. And if you have, a double up your reading. So we do have quite a number of books that we borrow from the library, and that happens every week religiously.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because we think that it's a gift.
Is reading a big part of her her development as an individual? I think our listeners would be keen to hear that Dr. Mara Baksal works at the National Institute of Education.
Correct.
And can you share a little bit about your work there?
I'm the program leader of the Masters of Education in High Ability Studies and the Bachelor's Program for Gifted Education.
So when people hear gifted education, I'm sure all our listeners are sitting up going, I hope Dr. Mara Baksal can give me some tips so I can turn my child into a gifted child. I want to ask you whether you think reading fiction is a meaningful activity. I think a lot of parents out there struggle with the read only for homework.
That's right.
And increasingly people see reading fiction as a time waster. I'd love to hear your views on reading fiction.
I think I would rather be known more as the psychologist who is able to recommend books to promote compassion and kindness, rather than a psychologist who can promote books to
make a child smart,
to nurture intelligence or to make them smarter.
But I would argue that compassion is a form of emotional intelligence, which also plays into intelligence.
I would agree, because that's part of interpersonal intelligence, being able to deal socially with other people, with other human beings, and at the same time intrapersonal intelligence, because it allows you also to be sensitively aware of the nuances of your emotions, the textures of what is going through in your mind. So it's being able to be reflective and at the same time respond to that manner of reflection as well. And hopefully you do that in an empathetic and compassionate manner.
That is so interesting. I never thought about that, about how when we talk about promoting empathy, there are 2 dimensions: empathy towards others, and then the intrapersonal empathy towards yourself. Almost. That's one. I need to pick up a children's book.
Well, one of the ways through which books can also serve to enhance any human being's experience would be that keen awareness of, or that sense of identification with the characters that you see and the characters that you read in the pages of a book. Because if you're able to identify with the characters in the stories, it would allow you to reflect on what is going on with you. And hopefully it also provides kind of like a vicarious learning experience and a platform through which you're able to engage in multiple views, see things in a more multi-layered perspective.
Which is why I love the Asian Festival of Children's Content, which is such a wonderful platform to look at a whole range of writers from around the region. Because I think it's important that the people within a certain country talk about their stories, which are so personal to them. And so a little child growing up within that context can see their lives reflected through the words and the pen of another. So, that's why I love the Asian Festival.
As regards kindness, perspective taking, I think I would rather leave that during my actual talk at the festival. So just to invite people, it's going to be held at the Pod at the National Library. It's on the 31st of May. So that's from 1:45 to 2:45. So if you want to know more titles, how to select picture books that are authentic, that hopefully might speak as well to your child's experience, do join us at the AFCC.
Wonderful. So you'll be giving examples there of books that promote kindness. Can you share some of those tips with our listeners now in terms of selection of those books? Because I think that would be quite useful.
Well, definitely it needs to be authentic, and it cannot be didactic in any way. So any book that serve to promote a moral lesson in a way that kind of like hammers the moral lesson in the head of the child, it's something, well, personally, I feel that it should be avoided at all costs, because it doesn't leave space for the reader or for the young child to come up with their own responses to the book themselves. And it does them a disservice, because it kind of assumes that they won't be able to get the lessons themselves.
Absolutely.
So it's really the discussion and the conversations that will be engendered by the narratives that are more important. So I think a lot of the parents also think of just providing a book to a child kind of like a pill of sorts, kind of like an iPad. So you do with it what you will.
Yeah.
So I think of a book more as a means of bonding with a child, a means of connecting with a child, and having more meaningful conversations that you might not otherwise have even raised.
I think you just made the best possible argument for fiction right there and then as well, because I think that's what fiction does.
Yes,
it leaves
exactly.
so much space for you to come in and think about a character's motivations, make up your own mind.
That's right.
So to speak.
Actually, research has also shown that reading fiction can promote empathy and also promote a sense of civic sense and nationhood.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Which might be counterintuitive
Yes.
to people, but it's true. If you are an avid reader, especially if you're also a reader of fiction, it allows you to have that space to get into other people's worlds and do perspective taking and hopefully become more empathetic.
And a better citizen as well, which is what we're focused here in Singapore, character and citizenship education. You're listening to Wow, or Women of Worth. Such a pleasure to speak with my guest, Dr. Myra Baksal. The show continues after this. Stay with us.
The news and more on 938 Live.
A reminder of our top stories this hour.
You're listening to Wow, or Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. My guest today is a clinical psychologist by training. She's an educator here in Singapore, and she is speaking about her passion of using multicultural children's books to spread the notion of empathy and kindness and compassion. It is wonderful to welcome back to Wow Dr. Myra Baksal. What do you think are some of the challenges that parents face in this day and age, especially when we're seeing, big movements of migration, and everyone's a global citizen these days with opportunities to work around the globe? What are some challenges parents are facing?
Yeah, while there are challenges indeed, I think that there are also beautiful opportunities. I believe people are already familiar with some of the many issues that we do encounter and face. We see that on the news, we see that in social media quite often. But as for the advantages and opportunities, I think it is so enriching to simply be a friend to an individual, regardless of that person's race, ethnicity, nationality, cultural background, and to simply connect to the person within, without judgments and with an openness of spirit. The challenge, of course, is getting out of our comfort zone, risk being rejected, or experiencing negative situations. And again, this is where multicultural books come in, because stories or narratives provide opportunities for children to vicariously experience a variety of situations, and it allows them to identify positive conditions and behaviors that promote respect for other people. So it becomes very important in that sense.
I'm wondering if children's books can also help parents in repair functions. I have a friend, and her daughter is of a race that is different from her mother's race, and she went to school and received some disparaging comments and came back very dispirited for a 4-year-old. So, when very young children are faced with xenophobic attitudes, are there some things that parents can do with literature?
Well, there is what is known as bibliotherapy, actually. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but this is something that I also practice, not on a regular basis, but it's something that I have explored. This is how you use literature to promote some kind of healing in an individual. But then there are different types of bibliotherapy. It can be, like you said, a repair. Something has already happened, and you're using books to kind of address those particular issues. So that's the clinical aspect of bibliotherapy. bibliotherapy, but there is also the developmental bibliotherapy. So knowing what you know about the developmental stages of children, you kind of anticipate what they might be going through, especially when they're teenagers, when they're in their terrible twos, and you can provide them with rich literature that would allow them to see how other children are experiencing these kinds of situations. It gets them to at least realize or have the recognition that they're not alone in that experience. So yes, I do believe that books can probably save people's lives if they're able to connect to the characters in the stories. It can even be a cathartic kind of experience as well.
And books can be cathartic for parents as well. I just have to say for our listeners, we have an archive of WOW that's available online, and you can head to a 938 Live SoundCloud page and find out more, or our Facebook page. And on one of the earlier shows, we had an author from America, and she was African American and had been taking her child out to the park, and he had been told by his friend not to worry about putting on insect spray because his little friend had said bees don't sting black people, which became the title of his mother's children's book.
Wow.
Picture book. So that's my recommendation.
I think there are many ways through which you can choose to respond to these kinds of negative experiences and situations, and if you're able to transform it into something positive, something empowering that hopefully could also inspire other people who may have been experiencing the same kind of stigma or prejudice, then again that would be very helpful in a sense, and it could again save lives.
Yeah. It really can. Dr. Baksal is here in Singapore. She's originally from the Philippines.
Correct.
I wonder if you could share a little bit about milestones in your progression in your career that you think might be inspirational for women listening in.
Okay, so this is my life story. Well, I didn't go through a master's program, so it was a straight PhD program in clinical psychology, which is, I'm sure most of your listeners who may be doing graduate school would know, you have to be very tenacious, you have to be very driven, and you have to have the perseverance to really finish your graduate degree, because it takes a long time. For myself, it took me nearly 12 years to finish my PhD.
So yours would be a great lesson in resilience, perhaps, or being your own motivator.
I would think so.
Where did that come from?
I think there's really just that hunger to know more, and the recognition that the more that I read, the more that I seem to not know things. So I constantly, I guess, try to know more in a sense, so that I can experience different worlds. And I think having that degree also changed my life. In a sense, I knew that at the end of this arduous journey and this arduous struggle, that there is going to be a brilliant light at the end. And I think it's also driven not so much for self-promotion. I think it's also because there is that desire in me to touch people through education. I've always thought of the classroom as my playground. So when I teach, it's kind of like a performance of sorts. And it gives me a great amount of happiness to impart the things that I know to people, because it multiplies. It has that kind of multiplier effect. And teaching teachers even magnifies that kind of learning. So it's not just me imparting knowledge, it's me learning from people. So again, that continuous building up, that continuous development and evolving as an individual, I think that's what I crave the most.
Well, I'm glad radio as a platform has managed to leverage on that multiplier effect, have your voice out there so that other parents can learn from you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful to have you with us, Dr. Myra Baksal. Thank you for being on WOW, or Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. Thanks for listening.